Well, I want to welcome you all to our session on creating pull for your brand, tools, tactics, and techniques designed to drive demand. My name is Ron Sharman. I'm the CEO of Astra Digital in Napa. And before we get started, I'd like to introduce our illustrious panel here. First, Michael McCann, who is the CEO and founder of Wine Country Media. Juliana Colangelo from Colangelo Partners, San Francisco. Liz Mercer, who's a GM of Bluxom Winery and also instructor at Wise Academy. And Karen Oliver, Chief Innovation and Growth Officer at Angel Smith. Before we get into the topic of discussions of the panel today, which will be very much around questions and answers, I thought I'd begin by framing the challenges we face in today's marketplace and with the changing dynamics of supplier economics. First of all, we all agree on one thing. There's more competition than ever in the marketplace. In addition to the 11,000 wineries in North America, there are more countries producing more wine than ever before. The latest that I saw a couple weeks ago was Sweden, in addition to England, of course, becoming a major sparkling wine producer. Much of this is helped by climate change, but there's other factors as well. If you add to that the growing category of natural wines and orange wines, you can see that obviously we know there's more opportunities for consumers than ever before. Secondly, there are more brands than ever before. I think there was over 100,000 TTB registrations for colas last year, much of which is produced by large public or private conglomerates, but many of even smaller virtual brands that are springing up. Thirdly, there's more configurations than ever before. There's wine in the bottle, there's wine in the box, there's wine in the can. There are more optional sizes as the 187 ml sort of tasting size bottles are becoming more popular. And this last week I saw something which was interesting, was a 750 flat plastic bottle that works really well on shelves and reduces shipping costs. Fourthly, there are fewer distributors than ever before. Down from thousands to hundreds, maybe fewer gatekeepers, but harder to get their attention. While all this is happening, national wine consumption has pretty much flattened as baby boomers sort of ride out into the sunset, and the millennials and Gen Xers and others that follow in their footsteps are not drinking as much wine, if they drink wine at all. So in this challenging environment, how does a winery succeed in driving demand for their brands? And I think we start today's discussion on the panel with a question of what exactly is pull in the marketplace. And let me start by asking Mike to give his views on this.
All right, I'm going to get cozy. Thank you, Ron, and nice to be here with you today. I'm going to approach pull more from the direct-to-consumer market today, and we have less experience in the retail, but the way we define pull is looking at demand from the funnel, which I think we all do. At the top part of the funnel, obviously we know about creating brand visibility, letting people know about the experiences you offer, the why part of this, and then there's the bottom part of the funnel, which is how do you get that person to buy? And so this is not necessarily breaking news, but when we look at how do you create demand, that's how we segment those two categories, and then we attack with strategies and ideas and tactics at each one of those levels. So I'm sure we'll go into that in more detail, but that's how we view pull.
Juliana?
Hi, everybody. Great to be here today. So in the world of communications, I would say that we define pull as creating a conversation around your brand that's going to drive demand. So getting people talking about your product or your brand and getting other people to help you create pull by making brand evangelists out of media and press and influencers and gatekeepers. So we would look at pull also by segment. There's creating pull within the trade, and you reach that audience in one way, and there's creating pull among consumers, and you reach consumers through trade, but also directly. But for us, as a PR agency, we think about ways that we can spark conversation in the press and among influencers that will help create pull from consumers, so that trickle-down effect.
How many of you sell through distributors? You're in retail, and everybody? Okay, cool. And then how many of you are really focused on DTC? I got a little, kinda. Okay, cool. I was just curious. So, pull to me, the way that I would define it is everything that you do in your marketing communications in order to get someone to put your wine in their shopping cart if they're in a retail environment, put it in the shopping cart if they're in your store, or to get them to walk through your front door into your tasting room. Do most of you have tasting rooms? Yes? Cool.
So, Ron,
Liz?
I gotta say, you painted a hell of a rosy picture there, my
Yeah,
friend. Why are we in this business? No, creating pull, yeah, it is getting harder and harder in a crowded space. But one of the things that we have, and to build on your point, is to flip that funnel. And so it's not just, we're getting people down that funnel to a point of loyalty. We've cast a wide net. But then we turn that into a megaphone. And so those that are our biggest advocates, engaging them to help spread the word back out. And if we take a lesson from other industries, which I know Karen and I have talked quite a bit about, but we take the lessons from other industries and look at how are they creating pull? How are they engaging their biggest advocates to help them attract new ones? And most of us are tiny, tiny businesses. And so doing this on shoestring budgets, it can be done, but it takes work and it takes a dedicated focus to do it. So I flip the funnel personally.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's a good start.
Hashtag flip the funnel.
Let's flip the funnel. We should have a hat that says flip the funnel. Okay, well, let's get into the heart of the matter here with some questions that I think will take us further down the funnel. First one is, traditionally in a lot of wineries, the majority of the spend has traditionally gone into three-tier to support national sales teams, retail point of purchase, and other in-store marketing promotions. Direct-to-consumer marketing budgets have been small to none. How has that evolved today, and where is there more crossover between three-tier and DTC marketing?
So I think one way that you can see some crossover there is by using your trade accounts as marketing vehicles. So that might mean partnering with a particularly strong account and doing a series of winemaker dinners, also building relationships with retailers and spending a lot of time with them to help reach their consumers. So using your using your accounts as vehicles to reach more consumers. So that's how we would look at the crossover between a DTC marketing and more traditional wholesale marketing strategy is combine them and use the wholesale accounts to reach the consumers, but put yourself into those positions in order to reach them directly.
And remember that your salespeople, the distributors, they're consumers too. And building on what you're saying, there are a lot of programs that you can implement that will hit both of those groups and be effective.
It's nice to see, I've been in this business for about 20 years, and it's nice to see that we're no longer direct-to-consumer. Is no longer the afterthought that it once was. And I think that took a lot of creativity and ingenuity of those of us who are running tasting rooms and direct-to-consumer programs, constantly raising our hands. And some of the, seeing the impact of, hey, look, we get to see, 20,000 people into our tasting room every year, or 50,000 people, or 100,000 people into our tasting room, and looking at those as brand impression. And so as brands and wineries started to take more of a symbiotic approach to this, or a holistic approach to it, we started to see more integration. Because to the consumer, it's a blurred line. You are the brand, and you have to rise up to engage wherever they choose to purchase the brand, whether it's on-prem, off-prem, in a tasting room environment, if they choose to engage online because they've heard about you some way. So it's taking those budgets, and I think it's looking at it holistically and looking at those strategies holistically.
From a practical standpoint, I think the way I view it in another sense is that social media is really agnostic. The same people, as you said, who are, buyers at distributors, at restaurants, at retailers are also following social media. So you can spend in one place, and if you're smart about building your audiences, you can use the same spend to catch a wider net to support, engagement and get people to create more pull on all sides, which I think is nice.
Yeah, I was just having lunch with a colleague today, and we were talking about how some of the larger brands maybe the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And so it's very confusing out there when you have a social media strategy or you have a digital marketing strategy or a national strategy that isn't aligned with what's actually happening in your bricks and mortar business. And so it's looking for ways to find that alignment. And we're, that's talking to a larger brand, but even for a smaller brand, having that consistency and a voice of messaging and understanding who your audience is.
Well, I can remember 10 years ago in my days running a software company where there was always a fight on a website between the brand that owned the content portion of the site and the e-commerce people that owned the shopping cart. There were different budgets for each part of the website. That was crazy. Hopefully that doesn't exist today, but that's how it used to be, fighting for dollars. In today's digital world, how does traditional PR make a difference in creating pull?
So as you mentioned earlier, Ron, wine industry today is more crowded than ever before. There's so much competition. So consumers get confused when they walk into a store or when they're maybe planning a trip to wine country. So they're still looking to experts, to the internet, to social media in order to find recommendations of where to visit when they visit wine country or what to buy when they're in their wine store. So that's where those articles and placements can help drive pull and create demand for your product. So if someone searches Thanksgiving wines, what do I drink on Thanksgiving, and an article pops up on Food and Wine, and your wine is in that article, maybe they'll put it on their shopping list. Or if they search best wineries to visit in Napa, if I'm traveling with kids, and your winery was in that article in the New York Times about wineries to visit with kids, chances are potentially you'll get a click-through to your website at least, and hopefully a reservation from that consumer. So it's about creating that conversation around your brand, and those articles and those placements still do help do that. That's more on the consumer perspective. For the trade, as we talked about with distributor consolidation, I think staying top of mind for distributor sales persons is more important now than ever before. So figuring out ways to get your brands into the publications they're reading on a day-to-day basis, whether that's Schenken News Daily or Wine Industry Advisor, to figuring out what pieces of news you can tell to keep your name in the headlines on a regular basis so that when they're going out into the market, your brand is top of mind for them when they walk into an account. So those are a couple ways that we think about using traditional PR to create pull in the market.
Anybody else want to add to that?
On the ad side, one of the most powerful tools we have is serving up ads where there is a third-party endorsement, and that is super, super powerful. So having those articles, you can definitely repurpose them as advertising, and that's one of the best ways that you can continue to drive awareness, and you can use those articles forever, as long as they're still up. And then when consumers engage with those or potential buyers engage, you're then able to target them with additional advertising and help move them through the sales funnel.
I would add to that in that vein that digital placements in PR have become more and more important and are more of a bulk of the coverage that we're seeing, and we think are more useful and impactful just in the way that Karen described. They can be integrated better into other platforms, whereas a print article is nice to maybe post up on your wall and have in your tasting room, but it's less easy to recycle and repurpose that print piece.
The other issue with print is that the consumer is considerably older. So if you know who your audience is, and for a couple of our clients, their audience would, if they had print coverage, they would be missing their key demographic by 10, 15 years. So keep that in mind as well when you are engaging a PR firm or really thinking about who you're trying to target.
And I have two thoughts on that. So one is we earned some press as a top 10 urban winery 3 years ago, and that is still on my entire staff's signature lines with a hyperlink to the article. So the evergreen nature of being able to still use those things, absolutely. And then two, one of the things that from putting on my WISE hat that we really encourage wineries to do is to focus, how did you hear about us? And really cataloging that information in your point of sale system and attaching that to transactions so they are able to see if whether it's paid advertisements, earned press, whatever it is, outreach programs that you're doing, referral sources, it goes beyond anecdotal and it becomes actionable information. So if you're recording, how did you hear about us? And you have a drop-down menu in your POS system that's standardized, or you use a SKU system, you know, guest of XYZ hotel, or heard or guest of publication, or whatever it is that's friendly that shows up on the receipt. You can run reports. You can look and see, are these guests behaving that are coming from this particular source, whether it was through press or paid or however it was. You know, how are they indexing? Are they converting higher than average? Is their average order value higher than the traditional guest? Go do more of that. You know, move beyond the anecdotal and move to the actionable, functionable information.
And if you're doing that, then if you know Sonoma Mission Inn has very high value guests for you, drop a pin around them and serve mobile ads up to those folks who are in their room, they're on their mobile device, and they're looking for something to do that day.
So going beyond just the contact with the concierge.
Absolutely.
You're doing the physical concierge visits and you're doing.
Absolutely.
So now you're getting into more tactics. That's good. Since we have a pretty good mix here of people with a DTC focus and others with a three-tier, how should a winery integrate a successful DTC strategy with one that creates pull in the three-tier? How do those two channels work together?
Yeah. You know, in wineries that I've worked in over the years, really taking the mindset of one team, one dream. And because again, to the consumer,
You're just full of awesome like hashtags and things today.
hashtag
Yeah.
that, no, but taking that approach that as the business, we are one team and we have one dream. Thank you. In everything that we do. And so we, you know, when something happens, and like let's say happened a couple of years ago, we got a top 100 wine. And boy, the energy that happens that morning when you get that Google alert, and before the POs start coming in, it's like, hold on, we got to lock this down. We got to have a strategy. We got to figure out what we're going to do with this top 100 wine. You know, of course, by the time you earn an accolade like that, you're nearing the end of inventory, if not already sold out, because why would we ever earn something that's long gone? Only happens on short SKUs. And so that creates that demand. And so being able to sit down, this happened a couple of years ago, and it was the owners of the winery, the national sales director, and me as the hospitality director saying, okay, what is the highest and best use of every bottle? We are one team, we are one dream. And do we need to give up some margins on the direct-to-consumer side that we would be selling on that wine to protect points of distribution out in the wholesale side? Do we need to be looking at key accounts and on-prem accounts that we wanted to protect those relationships? Could we carve out some of that very precious limited inventory that was left to then, you know, serve for our best wine club members or to hold some back for an offer for them? But it's having that mindset in everything that you do of one team, one dream, and that organizational alignment that happens to make that a very successful program. We were able to take that opportunity to build for the next vintage release, to create some programming around that and to protect our points of distribution, which were the most important.
Anybody else want to comment on that?
Feels like we've covered it.
Covered it,
Do you
right?
guys have any questions about that or anything that you want to ask that isn't clear?
Okay,
That thorough.
so,
More entertaining.
Definitely not.
I mean, we get down to the heart of the matter here when we discuss DTC tasting rooms. What do you guys think is the status of the tasting room as a conversion tool for DTC, and what has changed over the last 5 years?
All right, I'm going to jump in on this one. To me, when I've sat in audiences like this and I've gone to conferences, I'm looking for 1 to maybe 2 points to take away. And the 4 of us will sit up here and probably provide 57 different ideas, and they're all good ones, and they can all be implemented. If there was 1 idea that I think is key, and we have data to back this up in terms of driving demand, it is the tasting room experience. And I think this is something that all of us in the room that are associated with this industry in one form or another don't often get a chance to stand back and look at the experience in a tasting room. And I have been to a number of tasting rooms in the last 6 months where it is the wines are incredible and the experience is average. And there's all kinds of reasons why. Can't get the right people. We don't have the right license. We can't do this, we can't do that. In my personal opinion, when the most important thing, and this is the starting point before any marketing is done, is to create an experience within the tasting room that someone will walk away and tell their friend. So back to Liz's point earlier on the megaphone, okay, how many people in this room have an iPhone? Okay, how many of you people bought that iPhone because you saw a television commercial or an ad for Apple? Okay, most people saw the iPhone of somebody else who was using it. Let me check that out. That looks great. They started talking about it. This is done pretty well. So that's an overly simple example, though. But there are a number of examples in the winery business where there are tasting room experiences. They're not incredibly elegant. They're not unbelievably extravagant. They're just memorable and unique. And so taking the time to actually figure out how do we make someone feel special enough to walk away and tell somebody else about our brand? And there's all kinds of things that I think you can do, from greeting the guests with a splash of wine when they arrive. Don't jump into tasting notes. How you doing? What's going on? Connect with that person. A lot of this is basic stuff that I think we all overlook because we all jump to the top of the funnel on trying to get people in there. And by virtue of doing that, we've kind of just assumed the tasting room comes along for the ride. So in my personal view, the number one thing that you can do is stand back and say, how do we create the experience that someone wants to walk away and tell somebody else about it?
Well, Mike, now that you got me on my soapbox.
Fire away.
Thank you. The biggest opportunity that we see through the Wise Academy and through having done several thousand mystery shops in the last couple of years is that there's 3 key components. One is we're consistently not asking our guests to buy wine. We assume that if a guest wants to buy wine, they will. We forget that in the tasting room, to your point, that we are the relevant matchmaker in the middle. We need to find out what the guest wants, what their needs and desires are, what types of wines they like, and be the relevant matchmaker to our portfolio. And we forget to do that. The second thing we forget to do, or we certainly consistently don't do it, is invite people to join Wine Club. We assume that they see a brochure or a sign somewhere and they will just organically ask us to join our wine club. And instead, oftentimes we need to warmly, or always, we need to be warmly inviting people to join our club, and we just don't do it. And the third and the biggest missed opportunity is, again, going back to how many guests we see in our tasting room in a year, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 times that we have people in our business. We don't capture their contact data. We don't invite them to like us on social media. We don't get the second date. We're not having any follow-up. So somebody has sought out to come to us. Let's say we're in, Napa. There's 500 tasting rooms to go visit in Napa. They come to see us. They're here for 3 days in the area. They're going to go to maybe 15 wineries over those 3 days. They've already indicated that they're interested in us. And then to not keep the relationship going by capturing their data, it's ridiculous. I mean, how much more consumer pull do you want than somebody coming into your business, paying you $20 or $50 to hear about your brand story, and we don't keep in contact with them? It just absolutely baffles my mind. And, we can, I can give you the statistics, come up and see me afterwards, and we can tell you exactly how many times it's not happening in our business. But it's just And this is concrete data that we have.
What about the fact that so many tasting rooms in Napa and also Sonoma, as well as elsewhere, have gone to by appointment only? So they've made it more of a, they're betting, there's a lot more, they're rolling the dice a lot more. And so those techniques, if they're not employed, is even more costly for them.
It's the opportunity cost. You're letting money walk out the door. And then we also get into reservation laziness. Oh, we got the first person who made the reservation for the group of 4. We got their information, we're good. No, we need to get everybody. My husband doesn't forward me emails about the PTA. He sure as hell isn't going to forward me an email about my favorite rosé being released. So get both couples, get both of their information.
And you bring up a really good point about the follow-up, and a lot of that follow-up is due to putting process in place so that you can more easily get things out the door. And the way that we think about the tasting room experience is we think about the ecosystem of a consumer's journey with your brand. And that is the first touch with your brand. And there's still a really long way to go in order to get to, I think, what you were saying earlier about flipping the funnel and creating that loyalty and that brand ambassador who is going to talk to their coworkers and their friends and family about what an amazing experience they had. So creating process to follow up. Email drip campaigns, email works amazing for you guys. Don't believe it if somebody's telling you email doesn't work, because it really does.
And the tasting room's not dead.
And the tasting room is definitely not dead. I will say the last 3, back to Mike's point, the last 3 tastings that my husband and I did, they were all exactly the same. And I was so irritated and angry that I felt like it was a waste of my time. And that is something that you really need to think about. Visit your competitors, visit the people on your road, make your experience different. It has to stand out. And people want to be entertained and they want to enjoy their experience. They want to feel comfortable. If you can't do that, you should not be in this business.
And I would add to that, if you're entertaining media guests and trying to get them to write an article about your tasting room, give them a story, because they can't just regurgitate your press kit or your materials. Make sure an owner or a winemaker or someone with the principal at the winery gives them a tour, speaks to them, has a conversation with them, show them something other people don't get to see. So really think about creating a memorable experience and also telling them a story. And if you want to see coverage and have that media or influencer person tell your story.
That was pretty well thought out. Thank you for all that. So before we were I was talking a bit in the opening remarks about the changing demographics and the different wine affinities that younger audiences have. How do you tap into new audiences that are not core wine drinkers, everyday wine drinkers, to create pull in that segment?
You have to give them a memorable experience. It's got to be over the top. It's got to be cool. I'm friends with a bunch of winemakers and managers on Facebook, and I can't tell you how many times I see posts that are really negative and derogatory about their customer. And I just think that if you have that mindset or your staff has that mindset, get at, this is a hospitality business. If you can't do that, if you don't like girls in high heels on their bachelorette party that come to your winery, then get out of the business. Like, you are in the wrong business.
Wow.
I have a funny story about that, actually. Believe it. When I was down in Santa Barbara for a couple of years, we were just enough red Solo cups away on the bus for the guests coming from LA to be in rare form, shall we say. And we would get the bachelorette parties. And, we had a few rules, like, ladies, keep it clean. This is a family establishment. But we also knew that they were looking for a good time. And we had one particular younger gentleman on our team who loved taking the bachelorette parties. And so we would give them Kevin Babyface Killer. And they had their own special place, and they had a great time with him. And at the end of the experience, he was like, "All right, girls, what are you drinking at the wedding?" And he used to sell them cases of wine. And I'm like, they're gonna come, embrace it, have fun with it. Get them out of the tasting room, though. Come away. You got to think about the whole guest experience, but have fun with it. And find a Kevin Babyface killer on your team. Hashtag that.
I think one of the most important things to figure out how to find new audiences is to figure out first who is your target audience. I think we can spend all kinds of time spraying the market with messaging without really understanding who is a good target to buy my wine. Do I sell a $150 cab? Do I sell a $30 Zin? Do I sell a $10 rosé? Maybe you sell it all. But understanding who you actually want to buy your wine is a good first step. And then trying to figure out, all right, where are those people hanging out? Online, not online. But I think one of the mistakes we've made in our company, and I've seen our clients do as well, is not take the time to really try to understand. And it's not easy to figure out who is going to buy my product. It is the demographic decision based on price. Is it a lifestyle decision? Is it a varietal decision? So it gets back to, and I think I'm kind of Captain Fundamental today, I guess, but back to the basics of knowing who do we want to sell to. And then from there, there's all kinds of tactics. And I think one of the key themes that keeps coming out of this is telling a story. This is another one that I think the drum gets beat a lot, but I will never remember the tasting notes from any wine I've ever had, but I can probably tell you the names of most of the people that were pouring wine for me at some of the best experiences. That just may be how my brain works, but figuring out once you do have an audience, then figuring out what you want to tell them, then go figure out where they are. So I think, again, we jump to stage 3 or stage 4 in this, and we miss the early stage fundamentals of figuring out your market and then figure out what's interesting about this. And I guarantee you it's not 18 months in French oak.
So, Mike, then, are you also saying that it's not that I'm a small family-owned producer making exceptional world-class wines? Do I need to work on that?
Not at all.
So this is a good segue because the next question I have here is about storytelling. Storytelling, if whatever you read about marketing today, everybody emphasizes storytelling, whether it's Coca-Cola or Apple or Toyota or a winery, right? So how does content marketing, which is really storytelling, fit into the equation for creating pull? If your goal is relevant messaging for distributors, retail buyers, sommeliers, and others, how do you get to them with good storytelling?
So I'll answer this question more from the trade perspective because that's what we have a little more experience in doing. But it's about figuring out what you're going to say. And also before that, again, figuring out who you're going to say it to. Are you targeting somms at Michelin star restaurants? Are you looking for chain retail store buyers? Because the approach will be very different. So first, defining who that trade audience is, creating a cohesive message that can be implemented through different channels. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's reaching the audience through different touch points. So that might be an email marketing campaign, social media campaign. Maybe it's an event series. You come up with something really unique and partner with a few other wineries that are like-minded or share some part of your story, and you go out onto the market and do seminars for somms that aren't just, hey, come drink my wine, but hey, come learn about, we're a Pinot Noir producer, come learn about Pinot Noir from around the world, and let's have a discussion about it. Create something engaging, educational, and unique that's not just singular to regurgitating your brand story, but that's actually creating a conversation that puts your brand into what the industry is talking about on a day-to-day basis. That'll make your brand feel more relevant and I think also be more salient to those trade audiences. So speak to them like trade, engage with them. Also get personal. Wine industry is a relationship-based business, so just build upon those relationships and make those trade customers your ambassadors and your friends as well.
Adding to that, think about what they are trying to solve. What are their problems? And try to anticipate those issues and problems in the events that you create and the content that you develop. make sure, I see so much content, not just in the wine industry, but in others as well. And as brands and brand owners, we have a tendency to talk about us. You know, we talk about ourselves a lot. And most people really don't care. They want to know how you're going to solve their problem, not your problem. So you need to be ruthless about your content and make sure that when you are developing content, you are addressing their issues and you're not talking about yourself constantly.
So our company spends a tremendous amount of time on content marketing. And I think when we think about content marketing, there are dozens of different types of content to create, and there are dozens of different channels in which to create them. And so in trying to distill all of that down in a 1-hour session, it's impossible. But I do think when you look at this, I think the first thing that happens that doesn't get done enough is create an expectation of timeline. There is no silver bullet. Well, sorry. It is highly unlikely that you create something that is viral that then becomes a silver bullet. So if we take that out of play, then the good news is there's a phenomenal opportunity to create brand visibility and pull through content marketing, so long as there is the expectation that this is going to be something that's done over time. It's done continuously, daily, weekly, monthly. That compounds on itself. And so starting with, again, what's the message? I think that's a good message. What am I trying to say, right? I think saying less and showing more, the number one thing that drives clicks and drives purchases on our website are photographs. People want to see themselves wherever they are, whether it's a vineyard shot, a barn, walking down a dirt road. They want to see it. They get attracted to it. So be image-based, but find different ways to create content. You don't need big budgets for this. You don't. You need a commitment. You need time. Every resource is out there, but it just takes commitment and time. So small budget, large budget, how you create it, and then how you distribute it, that's a bit more complicated. There are lots of different ways that I think people can go down there, but I think first and foremost, focus on creating something that actually captures your brand through images and through messaging.
I'd also add, put a face to your brand. So don't just put a bottle out there and a picture of your winery, put a person. Some of the most successful social posts we had for one client where we did a monthly series of people from the tasting room and just talked about where they were from, where they went to school, what did they like to eat, what do they like to drink, and those are some of the most successful posts we saw on social media. We're just showing a face behind the brand. A lot of smaller wineries too. I know some brands that some content doesn't even have to be wine related. One of my friends owns a small brand, and they're doing a top 10 albums of the decade Instagram story series every day this month, and it looks like it's going really well. The content's fun, it's engaging, it has nothing to do with wine, but they love music, so it has to do with them, and that's their brand. So also think about ways and types of content you can share that are related to maybe the brand owner personally that will create some more emotional connection with some of your consumers.
On a more elemental level, one of the most important reasons why content marketing is overlooked is from an SEO standpoint, search engine optimization. Trying to get discovered, and it's hard out there if you don't focus on SEO. Most wineries ignore it, or they think the developer is going to do it for them. But writing great content and tagging the site properly, and whether it's images or written content, it's a really important part of content marketing. Wanted to say something?
I was going to say, when in doubt, put a picture of a dog up. Yep, those work. Animals, owl boxes. Like, really?
Yeah.
That's what got all those clicks? Owl boxes? All right.
Moving on to another subject, back in May, I saw the final news with his nice handwriting when Robert Parker officially retired 100%. So the question is, what role do ratings still play in demand generation and pull?
I would say what we're seeing is that they're still important for the trade and for those distributor salespeople when you've got, especially with distributor consolidation, distributors representing more and more brands. they need a quick fact they can look at and evaluate something about a brand for better or for worse, and scores allow them to do that. So it's still a tactic that I think is used in the market for wholesale. I think among consumers, scores, especially for younger consumers, are mattering less and less. I asked a friend yesterday, she uses Vivino. I said, oh, do you look at the ratings? Is that how you pick a wine? And she said, no, I just look at the comments. I look at what other consumers are saying about the wine. So she doesn't even care if it's got 5 stars. She cares about what the people are writing about it. So I think for consumers, scores are declining in importance, but for the trade, they're still a valuable selling tool and important.
What you're really asking about, I think, is social proof. And consumers need reassurance that they're not going to buy a shitty bottle of wine. So whatever you can do in order to reassure them, make sure you get that out there. It can be a comment. Comments we have reused from all kinds of different sites. It doesn't matter. A lot of times for younger consumers, what we're finding is that they trust peers more than they trust media or, like a Robert Parker or something like that. But you must have social proof. If you have no social proof, no one will buy your wine.
Well, I think from a DTC standpoint, one of the most important areas is TripAdvisor and Yelp. I mean, today people do look at, top 10 wineries, top 10 things to do in a place, or top 10 wineries to visit, or on Yelp, top 10, whatever. There's a huge amount of traffic to those sites, and I think that's an area where wineries need to pay attention to what people are saying and to use tactics to get higher up on the rankings. Google reviews, very important. Google reviews, yeah.
And if you're not out there responding to every review, you are losing You're losing to your competitors. So a good review, a not so good review, you must get out there and respond and make sure that you're on it every day. It takes 15 minutes a day.
Not even. Set up a Google alert. Set up a Google alert so that you're notified when those come in. And just when you get the email, take 2 seconds. Go log in, reply.
And same thing on social media, liking any comment you get on a post, responding. Even Instagram makes it really easy. You can just put a wave emoji or a wine glass emoji, in response to everything. It doesn't have to be complicated, but resharing and commenting on anyone that's engaging with your brand on social as well.
Well, you mentioned Vivino before, so what role do wine apps such as Vivino and Delectable play in driving traffic and increasing demand in the 3-tier?
I think they create a platform for that social currency, to Karen's point. They create a platform where you can see the validation behind a brand and consumers can feel comfortable making a purchasing decision. So I think they've become valuable in helping consumers make a decision when they're purchasing wine. Also now some of them have integrated marketplace functions. So there's certain wines of Vivino you can buy directly through Vivino, through their retail partners. So there's some literal direct pull that can be created through those apps, as well as I think they are assisting with the decision-making process and helping consumers navigate wine lists and wine shelves.
I would say another area, particularly for DTC, is if wineries should be tracking what people say on Vivino, Delectable, and other apps, and where there are good reviews, you can repurpose those reviews to your email list to market, sell wine, because it does give credibility from peer reviews from sites like that. So it actually travels over into the DTC side as well. Outside the wine industry, obviously, consumer products companies employ the latest digital marketing strategies. That includes a lot of social advertising, paid search, SEO, retargeting, et cetera. Question is, how can wineries on smaller budgets employ similar tactics and get results? And how do you measure success when you spend money in the digital space?
So I'll come back to my stump speech and start with focus on the tasting room experience first, because if you're just focusing on top of the funnel, then you're going to bring a constant churn of people in that ultimately are going to churn out. So let's assume for a second that we've invested more money and created an amazing experience. Then I think it gets back to targeting, and then you begin to look at, again, there is no silver bullet across there. There's three primary channels that you're going to get visibility or pull for your brand at some of these strategies: paid search, paid social, and then whatever organic digital sharing, whether it's through Yelp or LinkedIn or others. I think you can go crazy trying to figure out which one works. I think the way we approach it from our business and the way we help counsel our clients is, number one, again, create a long-term perpetual time frame. If you're looking for a silver bullet, it's not going to happen. The good news, though, and there's lots of good news in this, but the good news is there are lots of tools that help you zone in if you do know who you want, and they don't cost that much. You can test with low budgets in Google, test with low budgets in Facebook, test with low budgets in Instagram. Again, those are all things that you can do. If you don't know how to do that, the fastest way is to find someone, pay them a small consulting fee, and have them teach you. But I think to do that, you got to be prepared to commit to it. But I think, to me, that's the second or the third step. So.
Anybody else?
I'm like, where do I go? So tracking your success requires you to first set up your plan and determine what your outcome is going to be, and then figure out what those obstacles are to get there. Think about if you're flying blind, so if you don't have Google Analytics or some other tracking on your website, you are completely blind. If you don't have enhanced e-commerce on your site, you're totally blind. You cannot make informed decisions without tools. So figure out what enhanced e-commerce, Google Analytics, Google Data Studio is a great tool for you to pull all of that data together. And then you really need somebody who can understand the analytics and make appropriate suggestions and recommendations. Back to Mike's point, you do not need to spend a ton of money, but you do need, if you think you want to have $1 million in e-com growth, then you're going to need to spend some money. That's probably not feasible for most of you. So you want to really create those goals that are going to get you to the next level, and it's not coming back and saying, well, I'm going to go from, $10,000 that we sold online last year, and this year we're going to spend $100,000, but we're not going to increase our staff, and we're not going to put any budget between it or against it. So be reasonable and make sure that you are tracking your success every week on those dashboards.
To build on that in a very tactical way, put your phone into, or put your web browser into Google incognito mode and type in your region and your varietal that you make that you're most well known for, and look and see where you rank. And I did this with a region, and we just wanted to put in their region and their most well known varietal and see where they came up. Well, the first thing that came up with was a $6.99 region wine club. $6.99 region wine club. Okay, that clearly wasn't it. The second thing that came up was a blog from Jet Set Fashionista, who's really well known, but she wrote an article on that region. That was the second thing that came up. Third thing that came up was Amazon, which is great because Amazon hasn't sold wine in how long? So we started to scroll and scroll and scroll. And it took us until the second page before we got to an individual winery name with that varietal that was listed. So just kind of a reality check to this whole thing is that we think that, without putting any effort or energy behind it, that people are just going to find us online. We put a website up, like we're there. Why aren't they finding us?
If you build it, they will not come. Trust me.
Hashtag.
So I think it's a philosophical question for wineries. It's an amazing thing about the DNA of a winery owner. You'll wait 5 to 7 years to plant something subject to Mother Nature wait 7 years maybe before it gets into the bottle to sell it, and you treat it as an investment. When it comes to marketing, it's an expense. So you're prepared to spend all the money that's required to build a tasting room, tanks, all the equipment you need, but you don't want to spend money on marketing because you've built a building on a busy road. So I think the mindset has to be that marketing is an investment too, and in today's world, you don't have to spend a lot of money. You really can spend very little money to get good, and you can track the results. And that's how you get into digital marketing with testing and everything else. It's amazing what happens, particularly in terms of trying to drive traffic to your tasting room, and which can be completely measurable, or traffic to your website to convert to selling wine. So, but it is not just an expense, it's really an investment in your future.
I'm just want one add-on on this, because I'm noticing, certainly in what I'm saying and other things, I'm actually, with all of the challenges that Ron outlined and all of the areas that pitfalls we've outlined, I'm actually really optimistic about how digital marketing can play a role. And I want to, if we leave here with something, it's that every person in this room, if you are marketing, has tools available. As much as competition has changed, demographics have changed, palates have changed, whatever that, there are infinitely more tools at our disposal than there were 5 or 10 years ago. And I think the thing that dominates conversations that we typically have, more often than not, if we don't understand them, we avoid them. I'm certainly that way. If I don't understand it, Google Analytics is an absolute black hole if you don't know what you're doing, and that's okay. These tools, though, they exist, they're possible, and so back to Ron's point on the investment, there are lots of ways to create pull. There are lots of ways to create demand. There are lots of ways to create visibility. It is available and attainable for everybody. There is a commitment of time that needs to be made. It's not work harder, it's work smarter. So, the optimistic view out of this is it exists, it is there, it is possible, and there are thousands of examples of how it's worked over and over and over again.
So, we've got a little bit of time left. How about some questions from the audience? Yes. Question was, platforms like Drizzly, how relevant are they today? How do you get pull?
I'm not familiar with Drizzly. What is it?
Fast delivery, right? Yeah.
I think you need to have wineries, it's going to be very, very cost prohibitive to get as much traffic to your website in order for you to sell as much wine as most of you would like. So you need a very broad footprint. Having wine on, some of the third-party sites, creating strategic alliances with somebody like Drizzly, that's going to help you sell. You're going to have to figure out, what your margins are, but you need to have a broad footprint.
I was going to say, my approach to those things are to test small, right? Aim small, miss small. So I'm going to test it, see how it does, and then I'll commit later. And that's, and I have it to what we've talked about. What is my objective? What is it that I want to achieve here? What is my scorecard? How do I know when I've been successful? And that's up to each of us as individual wineries to determine what that is. There's no silver bullet. There is no right answer. Did it meet its objective? So, I'm going to try Drizzly in one city and see what happens. And maybe that's in support of doing some in-market work that we're doing there, or, we've gotten some write-up in that particular market. And so we're taking that integrated approach.
And I think to your point too, and you guys have been saying this the whole time, is that make sure you're not setting up, we've talked about the silver bullet, and there is a tendency for all of us, I do it too, to think about, I'm going to have this Oprah moment if I just do X. And the reality is that that's really few and far between. And so creating the expectation in advance of what, potentially Drizzly or any other marketing program is going to do for you needs to be really reasonable.
I would add that just make sure you benchmark and figure out where you were before you started that campaign and then measure it after. And if the only thing you did differently in that market was engage in a drizzly campaign, then maybe you saw some success. But also make sure you're measuring it accurately and not conflating it with other things.
Next, you got a question?
I was just curious on the visual portion. I recently was working on a project where I was trying to come up with a campaign that used keywords, and I think the keywords was like my biggest challenge, because everybody's using winery, everybody's using varietal. You had mentioned that testing on a small budget. Is there like a basis of what how much you pay per keyword?
Well, you'd have to devise a keyword strategy. It's usually not just about one keyword. It's about a series of keywords, but you're paying per click. So you typically want to look at what keywords are people searching for, what are the most common words people are searching for, and mapping them against what the costs are for those words to have them if people click on them, and try to find anomalies in between so you're not paying, as an example, if you try to use as your basic keyword Napa Cabernet, you're going to spend $15 a click in season, right? So that wouldn't make a lot of sense. But there's a whole art and science around it that is beyond just picking a keyword. Now, for your website, you may want, you may have 4 or 5 keywords that are essential. So for SEO purposes, it's different than for search,
Can I
paid
ask you
search.
a question? Were you talking about paid search or content marketing?
For more of the content.
Right.
Ads, so like the long term.
So,
I was finding I was too broad.
Yeah.
So just trying to find, I was using it to targeting location.
so the paid search side is exactly what Ron was talking about. On the content marketing side, and this is an entirely different topic, SEO has become scientific. It is the number one thing we do at our company, and I think right now, 95% of the content that is written today is not written optimally for search, right? So Google is out there looking at and trying to decide for you what is the best content to serve you based on what you're searching for. So every content post that we write, we use a third-party platform that tells us if we're writing content posts based on what people are searching for, not what we think they want to read. So as fun as it would be to write a content post on the top 10 picnic places in Napa Valley, unfortunately, no one's searching for that, right? So it's a great article, but no one's going to read it. So when we find something that we're going to write that someone is actually searching for, we actually write it, and we know exactly how many times to use the word mountain, wine, Napa, grapes, vine, sun, right? And all of those things within Google come together in a post that gets it ranked over a period of time. And so, again, there isn't one thing you can do, but as you look at it, I think you're on the right track by thinking about, based on what I'm writing, what are the words that are going to give me the best chance to get that found in search?
And make sure that, that they're relevant to your winery. If you're interested in learning more about search, you can go to moz.com, it's moz.com, or they've got great stuff, or there's Search SMX West, which is coming up here in San Jose, which is one of my favorite conferences for search.
Yes, gentleman with the beard, just like mine.
Thank you. My question is about a generational chasm. My wife and I have a winery. We feel like we do the tasting room experience correctly, as you said, and everybody's very happy. But we find when we try to advertise to the younger generation, they tend to want to lean towards those of their age that have wineries. Do you see any of that yourself?
So in the data that we have, we don't have any data that specifically says that consumers go to wineries that are either owned or run by their own demographic. I think what we look at is what are the driving factors that are sending somebody in, and more often than not, it's the visual perspective of where they're going to go first, and then trying to figure out what that experience is going to be before they get there, right? So if there are a bunch of people sitting at a picnic table that I'm old like me, and the 25-year-old's going to look at that and be like, I don't want to go there. That guy's hanging out
My
there.
parents are there.
Right? That in all likelihood is going to be an issue. If you both own a lovely winery and a lovely spot, create an amazing experience, if the focus is on that, then demographics should be agnostic.
And having a diverse staff as well. So having a team of people who can engage across everybody who is attracted into your business is really important.
Yes?
So a lot of the conversation that I've heard has been around if the first exposure to the wine is in a tasting room. And I'd like to expand that a little bit because there are lots of people who never get to a tasting room and they don't get the opportunity to try the wine. So sampling out at retail is certainly one way to do that. But what I'm interested in is also the relationship building. Like if you could address how it is that you're trying to continue to get people to be engaged with your brand once they've already bought the bottle and get them back. I've seen there's different companies now that are starting to do wine loyalty, points, gamification, things like that to get people to continue to, create these viral communications out there in social media. Some of these are tactics that have been used in other industries for quite a while. And I'd like to hear how the wine industry is looking at adopting or even using them today.
So a couple of examples that jump out, and again, these are probably things that most of you do today. One of our partners in Sonoma County had that issue where how do we maintain the engagement and connection after they've either purchased, visited, or joined, other than just sending them an email every quarter. A few of the things that worked really well, they implemented a recipe, and not just we're going to send you a recipe. They actually created more of an event around it where it was a recipe. It was the video of someone showing you how to do the recipe. It talked about why the wine that they bought when they were there actually went with the recipe. And then they tied that in at some point 3 or 4 times a year with an opportunity to come back and actually have that there. So that's one example where, if I bought the wine because I love wine and it pairs well with food and I had a food experience there, that's a great way to keep me engaged because it's giving me more and more opportunities to then enjoy that wine again. So they've done that a lot, and now a big part of their business, they've created a lot of content through that. It was pretty easy. They did it in their tasting room in the back. So that's certainly one idea that we have seen that's worked well, that's affordable, it's quick, and over the long term, it's actually helped the retention of their wine clubs because people want that, not just the recipe, but they want the whole package to it. The other thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up, is more events. And so these aren't just year-end grand parties. There's the pickup party, which everybody does. But they do more casual opportunities where by virtue of either buying a bottle or being part of that, they get the opportunity to go there and having it be more than just one time a year. And oftentimes it's done in different locations. So if you don't live locally, you can still attend. But that's another tool that's been used that adds an engagement component post-purchase.
Yeah, I was just going to add the in-market events, bring your club experience to other markets where you've got some pockets of members and keep them engaged in their own home. Also, you can create, now there's brands that are doing, I think One Hope does a good job with this. They do like Tupperware style parties where they've created this program for ambassadors to host wine tastings at home, and they give them an incentive to sell. I think there's some issues potentially with threetier there, but they've seemed to find a way around it and sell wines at home like a Tupperware party style. So you can also look into programs like that too.
All right, maybe one last question. Anybody? Way in the back?
I'm just wondering, well, hello. Wondering,
Hello.
hello. The best way to develop KPIs when it comes to digital marketing. That's something we constantly are trying to, what's the most powerful indicators of if you're succeeding or not?
That's going to depend on what your goals are. So, what are your goals? And then those KPIs need to be those supporting actions that are going to get you where you need to go. So, for example, if you know that you want to sell more wine online, what are the indicators that are telling you that you're moving in the right direction? It's traffic to the site with purchase intent.
Dropped cart,
Yeah,
average order
there's
value, number of orders.
all
I-
kinds of things. If
I
you
think-
guys, we wrote a handout, and if you give me your card, I'll email it out to you. And it has a lot of, details in it on how to plan, and then some details on a gatekeeper program.
I think you don't start with KPIs, you start with a strategy. And within the strategy, there's an objective, and you try to align the tactics with that objective that gets you to your target, and the KPIs have to align with that. So, as was said before, whether it's buying wine online, or getting more traffic to the tasting room, getting more people to download something on your site, getting people to buy more tickets to an event, getting more wine club members, all of those may be singular objectives that will, you have a strategy for, and that you may build some KPIs around that.
There are specifically to like social media, you can find industry standards when it comes to engagement rate on posts, pennies per like, what's it costing you on an advertising campaign to get a like on a post. So there are standards out there that you can look for if you're looking for like an idea of, okay, this post got 50 likes, is that good? It's like, okay, well, how much advertising did you put behind it? Well, that post cost you $5 per like. No, that's not good. So there are certain metrics for social media specifically that can help you set KPIs when it comes to advertising campaigns.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank the panel, and thank you all for coming today. Hopefully you got something out of it. Thank you.